This isn't an overly scary moment, but just a really odd situation that happened to me back in about 1997. In the late 90s and early 2000s, I worked doing trauma scene work. I was a supervisor of a crew that you never see or hear about, but what we did was go into homes, buildings, or structures after a homicide, suicide, accidental death, or situation like that. Sometimes they were very gruesome, and sometimes it was as simple as removing a chair and cutting out the carpet. Oftentimes, it involved a lot of cleaning and removal to sanitize the scene both visually and biologically. Our goal was to leave the scene as void as possible, like if you didn't know what happened there you would just assume that it was under renovation. This one time, it was about midday, so not the usual middle of the night cleanup after a dead body call. I don't know why the police and fire departments always waited until the night to call us out, but I would say 80% of the time that's how it happened. The day was a bright, sunny, not-so-warm day in a suburb of Los Angeles. I won't give the exact details of the location for privacy, and I don't think I even remember exactly what street it was on, but I do know that it was an older yet very wealthy area of Los Angeles, the kind of neighborhood where you would expect doctors, business executives, or people in the entertainment industry to live in. As we pulled up to this home, it was a huge spread of mid-century modern with fancy landscaping and a long curvy driveway. The place looked very well kept. The typical scenario was, I being the supervisor, would approach the door while my crew waited by the trucks. Since this was supposed to be a small job, we only had my vehicle and our service truck. I remember seeing an old fancy Mercedes and what looked like an old Porsche in the driveway. There were no other cars, but maybe there were some in the garage that I didn't see. As I walked up to the door, an older woman answered my knock. She was probably in her mid-50s, very well made up, with lots of jewelry on. None of the stuff she had on looked cheap, but none of it was really the style of the 90s either. I explained we were there for the cleanup work, and I noticed that she had a drink in her hand like a martini or something. Like I said, this was the middle of the day and probably before lunch. She led me into the house, and it was surprisingly dark and hazy with cigarette smoke inside. Now, what happened next was really odd. The entire place looked like it was a time capsule from what I would call the Mad Men era. The house wasn't what gave me the creeps, but as she was leading me to like a second den area, we passed through the front room, another living room, and a bar and pool table area. Like I said, this house was huge, but there were a ton of people in the house, and the best way to describe them was that they all looked like characters from some early 1960s movie. There was a guy with a sport coat, glasses, and a boat captain's hat, a guy in a tuxedo, and a lady wearing a fur collar long evening dress. The other people were all dressed in some weird collage of outfits. The amount of people all throughout the house didn't add up as there were only 2 small cars in the driveway that would only fit 2 people. Where did all these fancy people come from? There was a low mumble of different conversations all around, with only an occasional glance at me as we were walking over to the scene. I remember one of those huge old cabinets with a record player playing old songs, and I felt like I was entering the Twilight Zone. We finally got to the room where the suicide happened. There was a red velvet chair where it had happened, and it wasn't a gunshot, but I assumed it was a razor to the wrists. The lady was standing in the entry of the room, and I was looking over to the scene. I told her that I would remove the carpet and remove and dispose of the chair that held most of the blood. She just nodded as she still had her drink in her hand. I asked her if she could sign the work order and release for disposal of personal property, meaning the chair. As she signs, she said, "When you and your crew are finished, just see yourselves out." I told her it probably wouldn't take us more than an hour. Then she turned and walked away back to her party. I made the journey back to the front door through the record playing, cigarette smoke, and low-toned party conversations. I got out to my truck and my crew and told them that this one is creepy and there was a party going on inside and everyone is dressed up. I led my crew back to the room and they started bagging up the chair and cutting out the old blue carpet. We never found out who committed suicide, but I assumed it was the lady's husband. As we were finishing up, I stayed behind in the room to take some final photos as it was our protocol to take before and after photos. I thought about looking for the lady of the house just to let her know we were finished, even though I got the impression we were supposed to do what we needed to do and then not bother her again. I still wanted to give her confirmation. So, as I slowly walked again through the party areas, I noticed no one was making eye contact with me or even acknowledging my presence. You would think that if everyone at a party had known about the death, it would have been a conversation or at least some interest. I walked over to the front door and turned to look back at the party stuck in a time capsule, and closed the massive front door behind me. Driving away, I couldn't help but think of the strange day that job was. So bright and sunny outside, and I wonder how many of those people knew we had just cleaned up remnants of someone's last moments on Earth. In 2017, I went to a friend's birthday party. It was their 40th birthday, so it was a pretty big deal. I had recently lost my job and I was struggling with my mental health, but I had a very supportive husband and a good family life. It was a private house party, so I felt safe and excited to go to the party. My husband was supposed to go with me, but our childcare arrangements fell through at the last moment. I didn't want to go without my husband, but he felt like I needed a night out with my friends, and the birthday girl kept asking if I was coming, so I went. Like I said, it was a private party, and everyone there had been invited by the birthday girl. There were a half-dozen people I knew really well. Everyone else was a stranger, but I assumed that the birthday girl had good judgment and everyone there was all right. We were all having a great time laughing and dancing. At one point, I stepped outside to cool down and smoke a cigarette. A fellow male partygoer joined me. We talked about the birthday girl, how we knew her, and we talked about football. As it turned out, we were both from the same city and supported the same team. We returned to the party, and he asked me if I wanted a drink. I said no and raised my glass to show him that I already had one. I then put my drink down and went to dance with the birthday girl. When I returned from the dance floor, I took a big gulp of my drink, and after that, it all got a little hazy, and I don't remember much at all. The rest of the story is pieced together from various sources and photos. There is a photo of the male party guest and me with another friend. I'm smiling at the camera with my arm around my friend, and the guy next to me was kissing my cheek. I don't remember this. There's also a photo of me and the same guy who I had talked to where I'm leaning against him with my eyes closed. I don't remember any of these photos. I also don't remember talking anymore to the guy, and frankly, I don't remember much else about the night at all. I woke up the next morning at home on the sofa, and my husband was initially furious about the state I came home in, but he didn't know how bad it could have been. Apparently, several friends saw the guy who had drugged me earlier in the night trying to guide me into a waiting car, and they stopped him. When they challenged him, he said I agreed to leave with him, but I was incoherent at that point and had no recollection. A female friend took me home, which I also don't remember, but I know my friend saved me from something horrible. Once my husband knew what had happened, he was very supportive and concerned. I was later told how quickly my behavior had changed, and how quickly I had become uncoordinated and incoherent. I had never had my drink spiked before previously, but the scariest part to me was how quickly it happened. I gulped my drink, and like 2 minutes later I was incoherent and not able to remember anything from that night. That guy from the party had been decent friends with the birthday girl, but after that night had disappeared and no one was able to contact him or find him. This was all many years ago, and I saw the birthday girl recently, and she told me about the guy who drugged me and said he's currently in prison for assaulting his girlfriend in 2020. Please remember to always be careful with your drink. Never leave it unattended, no matter how safe the party seems. I made a mistake that night, and am forever grateful that my friends had been watching out for me. In 2010, I was 21 years old, and I was having a chaotic summer. I had taken a break from my college courses and started working a full-time and part-time job. I worked part-time at a grocery store, which is where I met a lot of people, and got to even go to some parties with some of these people. I was the type of person that if you put a drink in my hand, I was going to be smiling and having a great time. It was about mid-July, and I had just gotten off of work at the grocery store. I called my buddy up that worked at the store with me to see if he wanted to grab a drink or two. He said that he was going to someone's house party instead of the bar that night, so I decided to meet him there. I went home, changed clothes, and proceeded to drive out to this party. It was approximately 10:30 p.m., and I had to drive out to this swampy-looking area surrounded by trailers and dirt roads for several miles. I remember turning onto the road where the house was located, and when I did, I saw about a quarter of a mile ahead of me a pickup truck with its emergency flashers on. I took a quick look at it and thought that it was maybe my friend's truck because it looked familiar. I drove up to the truck and I saw a guy sitting in the driver's seat with a girl in the passenger seat. I told them that I had mistaken them for someone else, but I asked if they were okay. The man looked like he was already boozed up that night and looked at me with a drunken smile and stated, "No man, I'm fine. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on myself." Once I checked to be sure they were okay, I went about my business and drove to the party. I arrived at the party shortly thereafter, and looking back now, I wish that I had never gotten out of my truck and set foot on that property. There were people standing around chatting in the front yard, while another guy kept yelling back at someone in the trailer. I guess an altercation or a disagreement had taken place before I got there, because all I kept hearing was someone yelling. They kept saying that if that guy comes back to his property, he was going to mess him up. I did my best to ignore all of it and went inside to play beer pong with some people I knew. I wasn't looking for any trouble that night, I just wanted to drink beer and chill. As I sat on the couch enjoying my cold one and talking with some of my friends, I saw a heavy-set guy storm into the back of the house and walk down a hallway. When he came back, he had what appeared to be a rifle and a shotgun in his hand and headed outside with them. He came back in, and for some reason, I introduced myself to him. He stared me down while puffing on a cigarette. My hand was extended out to him, but he didn't shake my hand. Instead, he pulled out his pocket knife and flicked it open and said, "Name is Billy, and you best be on my good side tonight." I remember after he walked away, I decided I had enough of this house party and I drove back home. Something about that night was a little unsettling to me. I don't know what it was, but something just didn't seem right. A few days had passed and I was on my way to work. I had to stop and fuel up, so I went to a gas station and then went inside to pay for gas. When I went in, I saw the newspaper rack over by the counter, and when I went to look at it, an article was titled, "Man Found Dead Near the River." The article wasn't what gave me the chills, it was the picture underneath the title. It was the man I saw parked on the side of the road that night when I was heading up to that party. People believe that someone had murdered him, and to this day, I don't believe this case has ever been solved. I think back to that night sometimes wondering if I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I also think someone at the party may have had some sort of involvement in the killing of that man. Sometimes I wonder if Billy was the man that murdered this guy, but I don't know. I did see him with weapons that night and in an aggravated mood, but that doesn't mean for sure he did it, which is probably why the case was never solved. What I do know is that after that incident, I was very careful about who I hung out with on the weekends. One night back in high school, my buddy had a party at his house. The party was a good one, and late at night after everyone had left, it was just 7 of us who were all sleeping over for the night. His place was on the edge of a suburb. There are a lot of woods around the place that have always made me a bit wary. I guess I've always just been scared of the woods, I think. Anyways, 7 of us were in the house having a grand old time still, and we eventually decided to call it a night. Everyone went to sleep on the floor in the living room except for me, since caffeine really makes it hard for me to nod off, and I had a lot of pop that night because I don't enjoy drinking. I was also the closest one to the back door. About 30 minutes after everyone else was asleep, I heard some rustling outside. I kept my ears open, and I started to hear tapping on the back door. It was very quiet, and no one else woke up from it. I was sure that it was just one of the guys trying to mess with me, or maybe someone from the party earlier that night who had forgot something, so I got up and peered through the blinds. Someone wearing a skull mask was out there, which made me jump a bit. Even after he noticed me, he kept tapping, so I whispered through the glass, "Come on, man, knock it off." He still kept tapping, though. I turned around to find out which of the guys it was by counting heads poking out of the sleeping bags. I counted 6, however. All my buddies were inside. The tapping then stopped. I turned back around, and the guy was now pressed against the door, trying to open it. At this point, I was almost frozen with fear. I dropped the blinds I was peering through and backed away slowly. Then I heard something. I don't know how to describe it. It was muffled and pretty far away at first, but then it seemed to come closer. Eventually, it got close enough that the guy stopped trying to open the door. The sound seemed to jump forward and change to more of a roar. The guy outside screamed bloody murder and booked it, and the sound followed him as he ran. A noise came to an abrupt stop after a few seconds. All my friends in the house had jumped up in panic. They asked me what was going on, and I was still frozen. One of the guys shook me while another 2 got up to look out the windows, but they saw nothing. When I was shaken, I came back to my senses and I told them what happened. Normally, I didn't think they would have believed me, but they heard that guy scream. We called the police about it and they said they would look into it. We never saw anything on the news about it though. The next morning, we decided to go out into the woods to look for the guy a bit. Normally, we wouldn't do that, but 2 of us were packing heat, so we went. Nothing was out of the ordinary, except that we saw a bit of a skull mask on the ground. I'm not sure if it's really as simple as that man outside got eaten by a wild animal or if it was something else unnatural. The guys tell this story a lot though, and I'm usually too scared to talk about it. I bought my first house 9 months ago, and it's a huge accomplishment for me. On the evening after I closed on the house, I had a small party including a champagne toast in my new place. I invited my boyfriend, my sister who I'll call Jamie, her 4-year-old daughter who I'll call Marie, my best friend, and my son and brother who live with me. It only lasted an hour or 2, and it mostly included giving everyone the tour of the place. My best friend and Jamie wanted to stop in every room and talk about my plans for it. We had pizza and had the champagne afterwards. My niece Marie had a great time running through the house. She and my sister have a 700 square foot apartment, so the place seemed huge to her. Marie loved my room too. I have a closet in my room with a built-in pedestal kind of thing, so we sat her on it and joked that she could have her tiny room. All in all, it was a good time. Everyone who didn't live there was headed out around the same time, starting with Jamie and Marie since it was a school night. Not even 5 minutes after Jamie and Marie left, my sister called me, still driving home. My sister sounded shaken, and I was worried for a second that her car broke down or that she got into an accident, but no. Jamie said she asked Marie if she had a good time and if she liked her aunt's new place. Marie said, "Yeah, I had fun with Auntie and the little girl." My sister said that she actually pumped the brakes on the car because her instinct was to stop the car in its tracks. There were no other children in the house that night, just my niece Marie. Jamie was trying not to scare Marie, but she wanted to know more, so she gently asked, "Oh, what little girl?" Marie said the little girl who had been standing behind me all night. My sister pressed her a little more and asked Marie what the girl looked like. Marie said that she had long black hair and that she had on a pretty blue dress. My sister asked if the little girl spoke to her, and Marie said no. She explained that she was shy, but they had fun chasing each other through the house, and that the little girl was sitting in her house, which was the pedestal in my closet. When we opened the door to my closet, Marie had hesitated to walk into the closet at first, and I didn't know why, but now I do. Apparently, I have a little girl ghost in my house. She likes my closet, and I think she likes me, at least hopefully. My house was built in 1900, so it has a long history, but I haven't looked into the history yet. I have not seen or heard a thing in this house since I moved in, but I did not sleep well the first few nights because of the information I had learned.